Hi, it's time for a video about CD players again. About 2.5 years ago, I published a video where I talked about the lack of repair that's available for the CD players in the original NuTone IMA4406 CD players, and there'll be a link in this video to that video in case you have that model. What we have here in this wall of boxes are NuTone CD players, and this is part of the NuTone CD player graveyard, and these all have two things in common. They're all repair kit boxes for the NuTone IMA4406 Master Stations, which were made from 2003 through about 2008 or 9. The other thing they have in common is they're all defective. They're all broken kits. They're broken CD players. They're the boxes from the repair kits that were installed in the customer's master stations to repair the CD players. And we hang on to things like this because someday it might be useful. Just about a year ago, NuTone discontinued the CD repair kits for the NuTone IMA4406 Master Stations, and whatever kits they had left on hand at that time were sold off to an unknown person or persons, and they became obsolete parts. These are not manufactured any longer, and there are no more available. At that point, when we found out about that, we only had 2 or 3 kits left. We normally were buying 6 or 8 kits a month, but we had kind of a busy time with them, and we only had a handful left, and those are actually all gone now also. So we don't have any more CD repair kits, and NuTone has no plans on manufacturing any more CD repair kits because to a large extent they don't really have any interest in this. Recently, I had a back and forth email exchange with a person who had an IMA4406, and the CD player just recently stopped working, like within the last couple of weeks, and they were searching around for a solution. And I tried to explain to him in the emails that it's not a repairable situation. There is very little chance of repairing what he has. I suggested that he watch the original video I made about the CD players, and he didn't really want to let it go. He kept, well, he looked at it and it all looked okay, and was there a fuse, and is there anything he can do? Can he spray something on it? And all of the answers to those kind of questions are always no, 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 and no. Most people don't really understand CD players are a very complex device, and the way they were designed originally back in the 80s, they were designed to operate in a very specific manner, and if they don't operate in that very specific manner, they simply won't work. Here you're looking at the two primary components of a CD player out of a NuTone IMA4406. There are some small little ancillary parts that go along with this, but it's not really that important. These are the things that matter the most. So what we have here is, this is the electronic control board. And while this doesn't look very impressive, especially on this side, when you flip it over, there's a lot more on the back side. And what you have here is the important bits are this, and this. And these are all the integrated circuits and controllers that actually make the CD player operate the way it's supposed to. And these are like the little brains, and they all work together to make the CD player play and so forth. And then on this side, you have supporting components. This section down here is the power supply that powers the board and powers the CD drive assembly. Whether or not a lot of the problems with it have to do with this board is a little unsure. It probably varies a lot from set to set and board to board, but for the most part, since these are all name brand parts, this one is Panasonic, this one is also Panasonic, so is this one, and this one down here is SyncMOS. I don't know who SyncMOS is, that's this one down here, but these are all standard CD player chipsets, like the 3 Panasonic ones. They were probably all designed to work together, and it's a pretty standard type of layout and design that for the most part Panasonic probably specifies that this is the way, if you want to use their chips, this is the kind of board you need to design. The shape and form of the board can vary from model to model because it has to fit into whatever it's going to be used with, but these are all standard chips that you can actually buy if you want to. But there's very little chance of repairing a board like this, because this one over here, without even looking it up, this is like an 80-pin microcontroller. This has some type of firmware or software in it that enables it to control a CD player. And if this chip is bad, there's no hope for repair. It's just too complicated and too time-consuming, and there are other ins and outs of dealing with a board like this that I'll get to shortly. Then we have here, this is the drive assembly for the CD. This is the hub where the CD snaps onto. And then we have on the back, we have two motors. We have one motor here, which is the one that spins the CD, and we have a second motor down here. Let's take this little flex cable off, get it out of the way. And this one drives or moves what's commonly referred to as the sled assembly. That's this assembly that slides back and forth as it reads the CD. And mounted on the front of the sled assembly is the all-important laser diode right here. There's a variety of things that can go wrong with these. Contrary to what most people think or what most people want to believe, the little motors, they're almost never a problem. I have never worked on one of these or tried to work on one of these where the motors had failed, because these are the types of motors that are designed to do exactly what they're doing. The motor for the sled assembly, it doesn't run that much. It turns in little tiny increments as it very slightly moves the sled assembly back and forth, so it's not actually doing that much work. The one that spins the CD is controlled by the main board, so its speed is controlled and so forth, and these kind of parts are pretty foolproof, so that's not where the problem usually lies. In a lot of cases, the problem is with the laser diode assembly. Now, the little lens here that you see, that's not actually the laser diode, that's actually a lens that focuses the laser from the diode, and it's down inside where you really can't see it. And laser diodes are a fairly finicky and precise and somewhat temperamental device. If they're not powered correctly, they can fail, and when they fail suddenly. You can blow out a laser diode in a fraction of a second by putting the wrong voltage to it. And since it's all controlled by here, there's a chip on the little back of the board here. Some of these, there's lots of variations of this design in IMA4406s. Some of them, this little white flex cable right here, there actually will be an integrated circuit on the flex cable. There's lots of different designs. So where the fault is hard to say. The other thing that happens with laser diodes is they naturally become weak over time with use. And yes, I know everyone always tells me, well, we hardly ever used it and it still failed. Well, that may be the case, but they do get weak with age. And if the beam, the laser beam that comes out of it is not strong enough, it can't read the information on the CD correctly, and then it won't work. I talked about the precision of the design in all CD players, and what most people don't realize is that when you put a CD in any type of CD player, not just a NuTone, but it could be a Sony or a Panasonic or a Denon or some other brand like that, when you press the play button, there are 36 different things that all have to happen, and they all have to happen perfectly, and they all have to happen within a very short time frame, 1 to 2 seconds typically. And if all of those 36 things don't happen perfectly, the CD player doesn't play. And it was designed that way originally because we're dealing with a laser, and everybody gets all freaked out and worried about lasers, but there's always a possibility that it could harm somebody. You certainly wouldn't want to have it, focused and shine into your eye, because it could make you go blind or something like that. By default, if it doesn't work properly on its own when you press play, it simply will not work. There's a lot of complexity to all of these things. You have the mechanical bits, you have the laser diode, you have the chips on the optical pickup assembly, you have the controller board, you have a power supply, you have control integrated circuits, you have a microprocessor or a microcontroller with firmware in it, and any flaws in any of this simply prevent it from working. So they can't be repaired because it's too complicated. It's too difficult. First of all, this assembly, which was not made by NuTone, none of this was actually made by NuTone. NuTone may have designed the layout on the board, probably following a standard type of design that mostly Panasonic would have specified, because why do all the design and engineering work yourself when you can use something that the chip manufacturer provides for you? But the form, it has to fit into a 4406 and it has to have the right cutout, so they might have designed the layout to a large degree, but it is a custom board, and duplicating something like this is not something that an individual can reasonably do. This assembly, the drive assembly, this was made by some company, and there's been a variety of different ones. This is not really a replaceable or repairable item. Yes, I probably could find motors to put in it. The optical drive assembly, the part with the laser diode, is unique to this specific device, and it has to be this exact one because it has to fit inside the cutout of a 4406, and it also has to be compatible and work with this board. Now, we actually have found companies that made these for NuTone, or not for NuTone, but they made these and NuTone incorporated it into their design, and we actually were able to source brand new replacement ones, and they're supposed to be identical. They have the same part numbers, they have the same connections and all like that, but when you take one and you put it into a working CD player in a IMA4406, it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? I don't know. I can't tell you. It's too complicated. It could be that there's some incompatibility with the ones they're making today with this board, or it could be that this board has some custom aspect to it that makes it work with this unit in a NuTone intercom system. It's really hard to say because NuTone's not sharing any of that information with anyone, so there isn't any real way to reason it out. The other thing about working on something like this, let's say for instance that we were able to come across a cache of these. We found somebody and he's got 200 of them and they're all brand new and they're identical, and we verified that they will work in a NuTone IMA4406, and that would be terrific, but they're not calibrated for this particular board. One of the things that people don't know or don't think about is the fact that it's not just like you manufacture a board, you solder a bunch of stuff onto it, you plug it all together, and it instantly works. There are oftentimes adjustments that you have to make. Sometimes they're mechanical adjustments with little trim pots on the board or trim pots on the drive assembly, and sometimes they could be firmware or software tweaks that you have to do to calibrate it to make it all work together properly. Remember, we're back to all of those specific things that have to work perfectly when you press the play button. And that's the equipment to do that is very expensive and it's very time consuming. And then you get down to the last part. So if you had an IMA4406 with a broken CD player and someone said, hey, I think we could fix that for you, send it to me and I'll see what I can do. How much are you really willing to spend to make the CD player work again? Are you willing to spend $200 or $300? In today's world, not so much. Most people, even when the repair kits in the white boxes were available, the last price on these, when we sold the last of them off, were $185. That was enough for a lot of people who had already sent their 4406s in for some other type of repair to say, no, it's too much, I don't use it that much, when we don't really have that many CDs anymore, so I think we'll skip it. The other thing that would be terrific perhaps, but probably not as much as people think, is if NuTone was willing to share the files and information about getting these kits built, because there are files and information. This is all modern design nowadays, so the files that say how to get the board made and all the board information and what components go on the board, they are the files that you send to a PC board manufacturer, and they look at the files and they understand what they all mean, and they can manufacture boards for you. And the files would also include all the specific information about the drive assemblies and which ones they are precisely and where they came from and how you can buy them and so on and so on. And then the other little bits, the flat flex cables and the other things that you have to get, it's all in a build file for the CD repair kits. And if NuTone was willing to share those files, then some independent person, I don't know who, somebody who likes to have things remanufactured, like happens around here sometimes. In theory, we could take those files and we could find a PCB design filament house and have boards made and buy kits and boxes and flex cables, and we could make CD repair kits and have them available again, just like we did with the NuTone entry door stations. The problem with this, again, is one, it's a lot of time and work on our part to do all of that, and in the end, you probably realistically, to keep the price halfway reasonable on getting something like that manufactured, you're probably talking about having 1,000 kits made. You know, it's not like you can do all of this and then tell the board manufacturer, hey, you know, he says, how many do you want? And you said, well, I want to buy 10. They don't want to talk to some guy about making 10 boards. They got a lot of other things to do. Even 1,000 would be a push. You'd have to go to a small production house where they're willing to do what would be more like custom work, because it's only 10, or not 10, it's 1,000, because they don't want to talk to some guy maybe who only wants 1,000. They want to talk to a guy who's going to make 100,000 of something or 1,000,000 of something, because that's where they make their money. They only make a little bit on each one, and a little bit times 1,000, it's like it's not even worth getting up going to the factory that day. So why bother? Even if you had 1,000 of them made, to keep the price somewhat reasonable, you're probably looking at a cost to a retail cost of a kit like this somewhere close to what NuTone was selling them for. So maybe $185 or $200 or something like that. And then how many people could actually buy them and put them in themselves? Well, based on previous experience with people trying to install the CD repair kits like these on their own, I would say probably 40% of the people who bought them were successful, and the rest of them had a lot of problems and didn't understand, and it was way more complicated than they would have thought, and either they had to have somebody do it or they ended up sending the set to me to have me do it. So that could be a problem. You probably could overcome some of that by making a really good tutorial video that showed how to do it, and that probably would help more. But even if you got it up to 60%, it's still 40% of people, and a lot of people, nah, if it's $200, I don't want to spend it. So what it really comes down to in the end, CDs are a dead technology. There's been no advancement or improvement in CDs in probably the last 10 or 15 years. There aren't going to be any more. You don't see new products designed with CD players in them anymore, because nowadays everybody carries around music on their phone, or they have a Wi-Fi streaming device, or they have satellite radio, or some other things like that. CD is physical media, and basically physical media is dead. You know, how many of you watching this still get DVDs in the mail from Netflix? Probably not that many. I don't remember the last time I read an article about that, but I think the number of people that subscribe to Netflix who get CDs in the mail, it's down to like 12 or 15%, because everybody streams online nowadays, and having a Wi-Fi streaming device or having satellite radio is the same as streaming on Netflix. It's a subscription, you get everything, it's all full access, and you have whatever you want to listen to whenever you want to listen to it. So now that I've waffled on and on and on about CD players, the moral of all this is, if you have a NuTone IMA4406 with a bad CD player, it's done. It's not practical. There is no reasonable course of repair on something like that. We have at our shop a very high standard of what we consider to be a reasonable chance of repair, and that is very simply that you cannot tell a customer that you can repair any device unless you're certain that you can repair them 90% of the time, and the repair that you do will last a minimum of 2 years. If it won't, if you doesn't meet that criteria, you can't tell a customer that you can repair it. Now, I have heard from people that will remain nameless because I don't like to poke fingers at people. What they tell me is, well, you know, we've got boxes and boxes and boxes of broken CD players. The other places tell me, well, we have all of these broken ones, so what we do is we mix and match. We open up a box and we take parts out of it, and there's that, and there's that, and here's another drive assembly, and here's a drive assembly, and here's another board, and we take out a whole bunch of parts, and then we mix them up, and we try them this way and that way, and we make a different combination and try those two together until we find one that works. And then we put it in the customer's unit, and we tell them we fixed it, and we get paid, and that's the end of it. I'm sorry, that's not repairing something. That's some kind of hocus pocus, sleight of hand kind of thing that goes on at the county fair in the Midway with the carnival guys, and somehow you think you got a deal, but when you walk away, you're thinking, what really happened there? That's not fixing things. That's just nonsense. That's not actually fixing anything. Sorry, but if you have a CD player and an IMA4406, it's done. I hope you found this interesting and perhaps helpful. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up on YouTube because that always helps. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell or on the wheel, put in your email address, and every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.